Okay, there we go. So, Margaret, if I can hand over to you to speak about the African Transport Research Alliance, ATRA.
Absolutely. So thank you again, Joanne, and Neil for giving me the opportunity to speak here. The one thing that I want to say is my intention for this session rather was not to give a talk, but rather to facilitate a discussion. And so this is meant to be a bit of an interactive session that we have here. But because we are small, I might just make a few on the fly changes as we go along, so that we can, maybe have a bit more of a conversation. So, feel free to jump in at any point. You can use the raise hand feature. You can put something in the chat, and then we'll take it that way. So I have already introduced myself, so I'll skip over the introduction slide and just really talk about, again, the intention. So ATRA was founded out of a conversation. Literally, there was a conversation between myself and several other people representing an organization called the Ghana Transportation Professionals Forum, which is a US-based organization, and representatives from the Transportation Research Board, which is also a US-based organization that I think many of you might be familiar with. Um, and when we started that conversation, we really honed in on the topic of visibility of African transportation research, but also collaboration between researchers focused on topics that are relevant to the African context. So this is really the driving force for the organization. So what I want to do today is continue that conversation and get more input. I think, we are definitely not coming into this space thinking that we have all the solutions or know everything. And so a lot of what we've done over the last couple of years has been around stakeholder engagement, and really trying to drive the conversation. So that's the intention for today, is to continue to do that. I will spend some time just sharing the ATRA vision and talk about some of the things that we've done so far. But again, really the focus is to be able to discuss, synergies between different efforts that are going on, and figure out, how we can be engaged or collaborate together. Okay, so like I said, I had this interactive activity here, but I'm actually going to cut out the Menti poll. So you don't need to go to Menti, but I do want to open the floor to just hear your input on the question, of, from your experience, what do you see or what have you seen as the biggest opportunities or challenges for African transportation research? So, feel free to come off mute, share your thoughts, or put something in the chat for this. Who wants to go first?
Margaret, this soul man might go first. After all, been doing it for quite a while now. But,
Sure.
but, oh, just a moment. Can I have a gallery view here? Yes. No, that's better. I wasn't seeing your faces. I always get scared if I don't see faces. Then I might not see the smiles. And probably that's what matters most anyway. Yes. Now, what is it that I haven't said to Margaret and colleagues at different platforms? I'm trying to think. No, look, the main challenge is thinking, allowing ourselves to own the responsibility to think.
Okay.
So how do we do that? How do we
So when you
come
say,
as a people? I'm going to qualify it. You'll come in just shortly. As
okay,
a
go ahead.
people, how do we come to that place where we can say, this is our space, this space called Africa. We must own the challenges of this place. We own the need and the task of understanding this space. For a long time, that duty we have resigned to Bretton Woods. It had to come from the World Bank. We're waiting for the World Bank to tell us what to do. We have a regional bank there called AFDB. First, the World Bank did that brilliantly for quite a while before jumping into the swords of SAP. We have a regional bank called AFDB that hasn't taken on the mantle of research and development. That aside, we don't have any jolt on the continent. We don't have any force that might propel Africa to think of the challenges of that place. So in your brilliant work, Margaret, I urge you that try to look at how the people of Africa can own up that challenge of thought squarely, without hiding. Squarely say that this is our place. Can we understand it? Okay, I've spoken enough. Thank you, Margaret.
Sure. No, thank you. Thank you. So I think what I heard there is ownership of the problems that we experience as Africans around transportation, and being able to, let's say, use some critical thinking skills to come up with those solutions to those problems. If hopefully I summarized that accurately, but thank you for your contribution. So anyone else, what have you seen as the biggest opportunity or challenge?
Well, for me, one of the things that I think I want to class it as a challenge, but I think it could also be an opportunity, and that is the geographical scale and the diversity of the the number of the diversity of everything. But thinking like when thinking about transport infrastructure, thinking about regulatory and governance context for those, as well as geographical context and user patterns and all of those sorts of things, and how varied that is across when we say Africa. I mean, it's just a huge place with so many aspects and elements to it, that how can it be looked at as a continent-wide challenge, or how effectively can that be done, and does it need to be, and this is true for anywhere in the world, at what scale does transportation research, where can it fit and where can it be most effective?
Okay, excellent. So yeah, and that is going to be a common theme, I think, even in our work, as ATRA. We had a panel discussion about a year ago, and one of the biggest lessons out of that, because we had people representing different parts of Africa, was exactly that, is that depending on where you are, the priorities are different. So it becomes a little bit challenging to have, let's say, consistent collaboration, if you will. Anyone else? O'Neill, go ahead.
So I think, just trying to address this thing around the biggest opportunity and challenge, I think if you're looking at, I think for Africa, we have to look at 2050, 2060, and about the changes that we're seeing on the ground. So we're seeing, the increase in population, the increased urbanization, and the impact that this has on transport. So when you start looking at what the decision makers in individual African countries might need to think about addressing the needs of the people, but that split between what is rural to urban and interurban. But then you can also start looking at this in terms of regional, because a country on its own might not be able to address some of its challenges, especially when you're looking at freight and how things are moved from countries that might be landlocked to countries that have a sort of port, and that interplay between them. So the collaboration that might be needed and things like this all need to be considered. And I think, really trying to develop that evidence base to allow that to happen is really quite key. And, I will promote a little bit the work that the High Volume Transport Program has done. And hopefully Alfie will step in a bit to talk a little bit what FCDO has done. But one of the reasons that HVT came about was really to look at some of those challenges. And they had developed sort of state of knowledge papers about trying to identify gaps in research. And we've spent the last 5 or 6 years trying to fill those gaps, create a body of knowledge of research that can help improve the evidence base for decision makers. I think partly the reason that the AFRICA-CRIC, as a concept came out was really to try to say, well, how do we get more involvement from people across Africa and in Africa, whether that's from research institutions, universities, but also other actors, to come together to really identify some of these challenges that you're really talking about. How do we actually develop the research evidence base, and who does that and where? So let's stop.
Okay, so excellent. So thank you all for those contributions. So what I've done here is I've actually separated some of the challenges identified into 2 different categories. And so I think some of what's on this screen is reflective of the comments that we've heard, but not all. And so, in the first place, we have to think about challenges associated with conducting research itself. And I think the biggest challenge that we've seen and heard from all of our conversations is funding and resource availability. I think unlike in other parts of the world, in places in Africa, there is limited support, if you will, to provide funding for research. So, UKCRIC, for example, there's funding that's coming from the UK government to support that. In the US, with the Transportation Research Board, there's a significant amount of funding that comes from government to support that. But that's not the same in the regions, or in parts of Africa. And so that tends to be a significant challenge, right? Because if you don't even have the funding to conduct the research, collaboration is the furthest thing from your mind. And then, the second thing here is kind of similar to Dr. Amanya's comments earlier, the support and prioritization of research in the national agenda. And really, for me, I tie that back to the topic of ownership, right? Because within the African context, there are so many challenges, so many, let me say, problems, but not necessarily a lot of that critical thinking and ownership to be able to use research to come up with solutions to those problems. And maybe there may not even be a realization that research can be used, if you know what I mean, to resolve some of those issues. Reliable data availability and quality, including data standardization across regions, across borders, can also present a challenge. I like to tell the story of, when I was an undergraduate, a new researcher, I was trying to do some traffic engineering work and looking for data from Ghana, because I'm from Ghana, on traffic congestion. And I mean, it was such a challenge that what I ended up having to do was I asked my dad to record an intersection. So he literally stood at the top of a building and used his camera to record traffic, going through a couple of intersections for, I think it was about 30 minutes or so. And that was how I collected the data that I needed for my research work at the time. And it's my experience is not unique, because I've engaged with different people trying to do similar things and running into the same, data availability and quality issues. And then, of course, also technological and institutional barriers, being able to have the right advanced research tools and technologies, and then also that institutional support for ongoing research and ongoing collaboration. So that's one category. And then the second category is challenges that are associated with collaborating with others. The top of my list is representation, or underrepresentation rather, of African researchers in global forums. Again, for me as a researcher, based in the US, let me say, I've been fortunate enough to attend many conferences, many forums, present my work. And it's always very evident the limited representation or presence of African researchers in those forums. And so if we're not even able to access those forums, then there's a limitation in how much we can collaborate with each other, or even share ideas. And then, again, lack of those platforms to facilitate collaboration, and also limited awareness of those opportunities for collaboration. And what I mean by that is, you have people doing research on a particular topic in one area, and they're not even aware that there are people in a different area doing the same research or research on a similar topic. And so therefore there's that opportunity for collaboration. And so we end up having, fragmentations, if you will, in the way that we're doing research. So again, hopefully this kind of, these are just my thoughts, if you will, my own personal experience, but also conversations, especially over the last couple of years, as we've been discussing the topic of ATRA, of the challenges that our researchers face when they try to collaborate with each other. But the reality at the end of the day is that there is a case for collaboration, right? So I like this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, or with the idea that what two heads are better than one, right? So I put this up here just to sort of, I know I'm preaching to the choir maybe, but to sort of just make the case to say that there are really a lot of benefits that we can gain as researchers when it comes to collaboration. And some of these benefits are really will head on address the challenges and opportunities that we talked about. So multidisciplinary insights as it relates to being able to pull diverse expertise from different backgrounds, different areas of focus to help us develop those holistic solutions. We talked about the limitations related to resources, but collaboration can allow or can support pooling of financial resources, technical resources, even human resources, and then data as well, to make these resources more accessible in a way that it would otherwise be unavailable for individual researchers or individual institutions. And then collaboration also fosters an environment where ideas from different regions, different sectors can come together. And then we can also include global best practices to be able to develop more innovative and more creative solutions. And then knowledge transfer, which would be where we look at the opportunity of using collaborative projects to include some kind of a capacity building component, creating partnerships between institutions where we can foster the exchange of knowledge and expertise, to allow for research outcomes and outputs to be disseminated widely beyond a particular context. And then increased impact and visibility. So that's a similar concept to what I just talked about, which is where we can have collaborative research can really result in us having a broader impact with the outcomes and the outputs of our research. But then also that enhanced credibility because, collaborative research, there is more opportunity for peer review, for more input, if you will, which can then increase credibility. And then again, coming back to the funding challenge, collaborative projects are often more attractive to funders because they see the value in collective expertise, the value in shared outcomes, and really the value in doing things together. So ultimately, again, the goal here or the key message here is that collaboration can offer really many benefits for researchers, especially transportation researchers in the African context. So then the question becomes, so how do we, given the challenges that we talked about, how can we enhance collaboration in transportation within the African context? So before I go to my next slide, I'll actually pause there and open up the floor to any suggestions. So when you all think about the work that you do, the work that that you're aware of, what other people do, what are some suggestions or some opportunities of how we can advance or enhance collaboration within this context?
But Margaret, we've not heard from others. Maybe we should hear views from other people on that last question, because it's a fundamental question. But perhaps I can take this opportunity to just correct a few things. One, we often say we have a problem with funding. That is not our problem. Money is not, the need for money isn't our problem. Our problem is that we don't want owner, as I said. And I'll give you a simple example. There was a recent attempt by the World Bank to sign MOUs with a few African universities. That was signed under another umbrella to which I belong, called the World Congress on Transport Research Society. What progress have we made? So the point I need to make is that, please, let's just appreciate that money isn't our problem. It's not the reason that we are not researching. And a second quick point, I don't see Neil's face, but I hope he can hear me, because he's made this point louder than I can do now, and I might ever be able to do. We must not, and really we need to move away from this problem. We cannot tackle the challenges of the infrastructure phase of our problem in isolation. Too often we have these conferences around Africa looking at transport. It is Neil, when we met in Cape Town the other day, who made this point very strongly. Most of the transport challenges are energy issues. Most of the transport challenges are digitalization issues. We have to come to a point where we look at transport as just a name of the moment. Maybe it might be helpful to say, well, my name is transport. I come from this family called infrastructure. Or maybe I come from this family called public investment. No, that's a kind of vernacular that is well understood in Africa. Someone bears a name and the person comes from some family. And if we don't crack that, we are going to waste another year, 2025. So I would like us to make that, to underline that point. And I'm now soon finishing. Tapping private finance. I've glanced at RIDE. I've glanced at RIDE. And the second point is, how do we tap private finance? Now, that is not an African problem. And on that issue, Africa might have to look to the UK. It's a big problem of Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer. Their main problem now is they're looking for a frame they can use for tapping private finance. The old one was called PF2. That is a long story. One day we can sit and have a conversation on how this whole thing evolved. And the way the money market works, if there's a big storm here, if there's a big formation here, that is likely to reverberate across the world. That's how PPPFI happen. So I look forward to how this is going to evolve. Africa has got a special situation where we must rely on our domestic money pools, the credit unions. That is a special situation. But it's a joint, it's kind of a world problem, a problem of now, how we tap private finance. And I wish RIDE is a big opportunity. Neil, Alfie, please, let's not waste this the way we wasted HVT. Wow, this man Amonya is speaking in a strong way. But for good reason. One day it was raining hard, and we're down at 109 Britannia Walk, CIHT, long before this HVT program started. And that time we look at the hopes of HVT, what it might do. That hasn't been realized. And nobody has really asked, come on, what happened? How do you waste time and money? So please, our two friends, let's make sense of this right for the betterment of humanity. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like to come in.
Okay.
Can you come in, please?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah, I'm using my my mobile. It's as I said, I'm a researcher. I'm Professor Alphonse Casey, working with Harvard University as a researcher, and I'd like to say that Margaret, you have said it all, and I think that is true. And I think, of course, it's true that we don't have funding for research. We are in Tanzania. We are trying to see if 1% could be allocated on the budget to research, but it's not coming for all the research, and it's not coming out. So that is true, and all the researches which have been done, mostly, not only transportation but also in other areas, is actually coming from the north. We have to agree that there's no question about that. There's not much coming money for research, which is coming there, and it's not much even which is coming out to support research. So I say that much of the money of the funding is coming is actually from our partners in the north, in collaboration, of course, from Sweden, from UK, and other countries. So that is true what we are saying. Secondly, I would say that we have, I say, two major challenges which we are facing. One is that there's not much uptake. We are saying that research which is being done, I don't think it's been brought up to the what we call the industry. So the link between research and industry is very weak. That is not coming out from your presentation. That there's a very weak research, what we call research fundings, which is linked with the industry, which is unlike in the north, where actually research is very much linked with the industry, and it can be what we call bought off by from the public, and they use it, and they even do what actually improvements. So that is a major drawback, which I'll say from my side. The second major challenge also, which I think is important, is that in our countries, there's no, which you have not mentioned, and I didn't know why you didn't like to mention, political instability. You see, if there's constant fighting everywhere and all this, and the political stability is not there, there's no way research could come in very well, and especially in other countries, several countries of Africa. So I think political stability is a major issue, which I think you need also to look into to see what is happening in Africa, so that we can do that. And the third thing is that, which you have not mentioned, urbanization is taking place in a very fast rate. And of course, that is an opportunity, that we are having a very fast urbanization, which is a major opportunity that we could come in. I didn't hear from your presentation at the beginning, the opportunities you are talking about, which I think they didn't come out clearly, that we have a lot of opportunities linking within the urban areas themselves, because they're expanding spatially and demographically, but also intra linkages between rural and urban, which I think has been mentioned by one of our colleagues here. That is also an opportunity, how to now to transport people very fast from the hinterland to the one actually within with the urban areas, but the other one is between the hinterland and the urban areas. Those is the major areas which I think are very, very pertinent, and is an opportunity which could be tapped in. And using the examples in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam particularly, where we are introducing the BRT to transport the people very fast from one place to another. And I think those are the examples probably we could bring in. And where actually we are now, where the government is now welcoming the private sector to work together with the public sector, so that actually the transportation could be enhanced. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for those comments. And I think that this conversation could go on longer than we have enough time for. So I do want to just pause here and get through the rest of the presentation. But I will say, it's very clear even from these comments, one of the challenges that we mentioned up front, which is the diversity of the challenges across the region, right? Because I think you're both right. I think in some areas, yes, funding, or maybe in most areas, yes, availability of funding, especially from a national or government perspective, is a critical issue. But to Dr. Amanya's point, there are some funding sources that are available, and it just depends on, the ability for us to be able to take ownership of the work that we're doing and put forward, the right level of expertise to take advantage of that funding. But altogether, I think really the main question here that I wanted to bring up is, given the challenges that we've talked about, given the fact that we know that there is a case for collaboration, what can we do to be able to enhance or advance collaboration? So on my next slide here, I have some suggestions. I'm gonna breeze through this slide very quickly and then go into talking a little bit about ATRA. But really the key point here is that there are opportunities to enhance how African transportation researchers collaborate, whether it is through developing joint educational programs, introducing funding opportunities that require collaboration, creating community-informed or developing community-informed research and stakeholder engagement forums, which allow people to communicate, to interact with each other. Research partnerships, as was just mentioned, between researchers, between government agencies, private sector companies. And then the final point here is creating those networks and those initiatives at a regional and international level to be able to have the platform, to have the conversation. So that last point here is exactly what ATRA is, and exactly what we're trying to accomplish with the goal of ATRA. I didn't turn off my animation here, so I'm just gonna click quickly through here. But the point is that ATRA was founded as a nonprofit organization with the goal of advancing transportation research, policy, and practice. Our mission really is to create a global platform where African transportation professionals can come together and have those conversations on how we can coordinate our research, how we can exchange knowledge, how we can share good practice. But maybe not most importantly, but very importantly, how we can facilitate implementation of our innovative ideas and research outcomes. So ultimately, the goal is to be able to provide this kind of forum where we can have collaboration, have knowledge or professional development for transportation students, for transportation researchers, practitioners, and policymakers. And one of the key things that we are really trying to accomplish is bridging that gap between professionals in Africa that are based in Africa, but also professionals in the diaspora who have an interest in doing work that's related for that context. So this is really the vision or the goal that ATRA was born out of. Now, with our long-term vision of enhancing the visibility and realized impacts of transport research, our key activities include creating networking and coordination opportunities, as I mentioned, providing educational and professional development experiences, facilitating implementation sessions of research and innovation implementation sessions, and then also trying to increase communication of research outcomes and outputs. So this is what we're trying to accomplish. Now, I will say, just like this forum, this conversation we're having now, as we've been talking about ATRA and engaging with different stakeholders, we found that this is not a new concept, right? There have been many before us who've come in and tried to do a similar thing. And so, like I said, we're definitely not coming in thinking that we have the best solution and thinking that we know exactly what we're doing. But we recognize the fact that this has been a desire, a long-standing desire. And so in the spirit of collaboration, this is where we also want to partner with other entities, other people, other organizations that have the same idea, like UKCRIC, for example. Because again, having that collaboration, having that working together is really how we will be able to accomplish that goal. So very quickly, I just want to share a little bit about our reach and our engagement so far. So for the people over the last couple of years, our first couple of years as an organization, we've really been focused on organizing and engaging with stakeholders. So some of that has included establishing collaborative relationships with partners, such as UKCRIC. And then last year, we launched the ATRA Network Digest newsletter, and we published 2 issues last year, reaching a fairly diverse range of recipients. And so as you can see, most of our audience is researchers, but we do also have some practitioners, some students, and policymakers. In terms of the countries represented, I'm happy to show that most of our recipients represent African countries, but we do have folks from different parts of the world who are also interested in pushing this agenda. I do have a QR code on the screen. If you're not subscribed, if you don't receive our newsletter and you would like to, please go ahead and scan that QR code, and it will open up a form for you to get subscribed to the newsletter. So last year we had the opportunity to participate in a number of different events, some thanks to the High Volume Transport Program. So thank you, Neil. There was the 2024 African Transport Research Conference in Cape Town, where I had the opportunity to sit on a panel discussion on this very topic, which is the future of transport research in Africa. We also, on the sidelines of the World Bank is a partner for ATRA. We had a panel discussion focused on critical issues in transportation across the African continent. And this is where I mentioned this earlier. We had representation from different parts of the continent, from Malawi, from Ghana, and then also a representative from the World Bank. And this was a really critical conversation that we had, which brought to light what we all kind of already knew, which is the fact that, the challenges are many and they are diverse depending on where you are in the region. And then in October last year, I had the opportunity to provide a virtual keynote address as part of a session at the IRF World Congress called Unlocking a Pathway to Low Carbon Resilient Transport in Low Income Countries while still enabling economic growth. That's a mouthful. But altogether, in the activities that we've done so far, I think the common theme is pushing this conversation on collaboration in African transport research, why it's important, and how, let me say why it's important and the number of people or the amount of interest that there is in pushing that agenda. So what we need to do now, what we're faced with as an organization, we're looking at how can we take all of this interest, how can we leverage all of this energy and actually use it to work towards our goal. So we have a few things that we're planning, a few activities that we're working on. The first is more or less a research effort or initiative, which is called Critical Issues in Transportation Across Africa. The goal here is to identify priority areas of importance, topical areas of importance for the transportation industry. So the question here is, what are the most critical issues in transportation across Africa? We started, this conversation and started to bring people together to work on this effort. But it's a work in progress, and this is one that will really require a lot of manpower, right? Again, because it's a big question, and there's not a single answer. And so we have to be able to provide a perspective that represents or that is representative of the continent as a whole, not necessarily trying to simplify the answers to this question into one thing, but being able to provide the perspective of what those critical issues are, maybe depending on the region that you're in. The second thing that we're looking to do in the short to midterm is facilitate research, implementation, and knowledge transfer workshops. So, again, just like Alphonse mentioned, we want to be able to have those conversations between researchers, presenting and sharing the outputs and the outcomes of their work with practitioners and policymakers, so that we can help to drive adoption of those research outputs. And then finally, something that's very near and dear to my own heart is mentoring and capacity building for students. So to be able to support student participation in global educational opportunities and providing some training and development. So these are the things that we are looking to accomplish as ATRA. So like I said, for the last couple of years, we've been having these conversations, and now we are really at a turning point of, okay, how do we take all of this energy? How do we take all of this information and start to really add value to the industry and to the people that we're looking to serve? So that's essentially where I'm going to end the information that I had to share. I couldn't end without inviting you all to engage with us, whether you are just joining the network to receive the information that we disseminate, or collaborating with us on research projects such as the Critical Issues Initiative, or even collaborating with us to identify funding sources for ATRA as an organization, but also for our members, whether they're students or researchers. This is essentially, a call out to explore the ways in which your support can help us, realize the goals that we're trying to accomplish. I do want to point out that everyone is welcome to participate. We're not limiting this to transportation professionals from Africa. And I think whether you're doing this through your expertise or your time, every single effort will help us to propel our vision forward. So I know we're just out of time. What I had intended on doing was really open up the conversation, just as we've been doing. And I have some initial questions here, but really more broadly speaking, just open to your thoughts, your questions, your comments on what we're trying to accomplish and what we need to maybe be mindful of to make sure that we are able to make that progress. So I've spoken enough. I'll pause there and turn it over to you all.
Thank you very much, Margaret. That was really, really interesting. And I know we've only got 5 minutes left, and I don't want to take that up necessarily with this question, but just to put it out there, one of the things that we are always have in our sights at UKCRIC is how to support the collaboration and specifically the people's time and how you fund that outside of any kind of workshopy sort of things or anything that might cost money. Collaboration requiring nurturing, and it doesn't happen on its own. And so I am interested in how people's time is managed around the collaboration at the moment, because that's one of the things that UKCRIC faces as we grow, that need to support the collaboration.
So the question there is, I don't know if I've misunderstood you, but I think your question there is, how do we provide or create a space where people are willing to give the time? Is that kind of?
Yeah, I suppose. Well, actually, a more basic question is: Are people giving their time free? Because to ensure the collaboration and ATRA continue. Is that and I suppose it's how do you get people to the bigger question is how do you get people and organizations to value this kind of initiative, and hopefully support it through actual monetary contributions?
Yeah, it's a great question. So at this point right now, everything that ATRA has done has been volunteer based. We do not have any funding sources outside of sort of personal contributions, if you will. And what I've noticed, what I can say is that there are a lot of people who are actually passionate about this topic and willing to give their time. And I mean, I have a team of about 10 to 12 people, if I'm remembering correctly, who have helped me over the last couple of years in doing all of the things that ATRA has done. And for the most part, that has all been volunteer based. Like I said, the World Bank is a partner, and so they have offered a couple of resources. So those people are paid by the World Bank, but it's limited in their time. But there are actually a lot of individuals who have an interest in increased collaboration and are willing to give their time. Now, because it isn't compensated, if you will, when things come up in life or when things come up in the commitments that are actually paying, then the commitment to ATRA dwindles a little bit, or the commitment to this cause then dwindles a little bit, which is normal. So yeah, I mean, I think altogether, I think that people it really is just an innate passion that people have because they've also experienced or have seen some of the challenges that we've just talked about. And they do see the opportunity that is available if we are able to get that collaboration going. But I like to something that's been at the top of my mind is the concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Not sure if you all are familiar with that, but that's basically the concept that says if my basic needs are not met, then I don't really have the capacity mentally or otherwise to explore things beyond my basic needs. And so that is also at play here in terms of people's ability to devote time or efforts to ATRA.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Margaret?
Or comments?
Or comment? Sorry, doesn't have to be a question.
I don't have a question, but I was thinking that probably establishing the network is very important, especially looking for those people who are interested through the universities or through the other research institutions. Probably that could be one of the major entry points. Establishing areas where people are already doing some transportation research. For example, I'm talking about Art University, for example, University of Dar es Salaam, in my case, and also some other institutions in Tanzania who are actually interested in this. And I think this is a very interesting area. And probably that could be, Margaret could be that an entry point rather than looking for the manifest. When the network is already there, probably opportunities for collaboration research and also could come in.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for that comment. And so that is where we started, was with developing the network. So we do have, like I said, a network of people who are receiving our information, but we're in a position where we want to start showing added value beyond just receiving or disseminating information. So that's where I talked about some of the short to midterm activities that we're trying to implement, because we want to show that being a part of this network can actually result in increased activity around research collaboration. That's the goal that we have here. I know we're just out of time, so I'll just skip to my last slide, because I like this statement here, the bold vision of ATRA. We want to be able to build a world where the power of collaboration and innovation is driving effective programming and research that impacts policy decisions and infrastructure development as well. So 100%, with you, Alphonse, in terms of developing the network, but then also leveraging the network to be able to actually add value.
I think that's a really nice point to end on there. So I think we'll close with thanking Margaret very much for a really interesting presentation, and to thank everyone for attending and for the very insightful questions and comments.
Thank you very much. And I will encourage you all, if you do want to learn more or partner with us, please do reach out to me. As I said, we are engaging with stakeholders. We are trying to build the network, but also we're trying to start adding value. So feel free to reach out to me, and I look forward to working with you all.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you.